Well, hello and a very warm welcome to our June Lunchtime Dial-In. Summer is finally here. Thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to sharing with you the latest updates in the charity world as they particularly apply to churches and Christian charities. My name's Jackie Fletcher. I'm Head of Treasurer Services here at Stewardship. I'm joined by two of my colleagues today, Lawrence Duplessis, who is Director of Church and Charity Professional Services, and also Archie McDowell, who is Head of our Accounts Examinations Service. So in case you're new to us, our vision at Stewardship is for the world to encounter Jesus through the generosity of his church. And the purpose of today's dial-in is to strengthen Christian causes. If you'd like to find out more about how we could support your church or charity, you can check out all of our services and resources on our website, or do feel free to call our church and charity team and chat to one of our advisors. The number's on your screen now, and we'll also send this out in the follow-up email later today. If you'd like to make sure you receive the follow-up materials, including the recording of today's session, you'll need to ensure that you're signed up to the dial-in mailing list. So if you haven't yet done so, please email in to find out how, and we will send you the link so that you can do that. So today's agenda includes digital filing of charity accounts. We're going to look at internal financial controls. CC8 has been updated. The annual return update, this is take 2. We talked a little bit about this last time. There's a little more to say this time. There's a brief tax compliance update, and we're also going to update you with the Charities Act implementation process. And this will be followed, as usual, by our Q&A session at the end. So do bring your questions on today's topics. If you have questions today during the presentations, please use the chat function to ask them. We'll answer as many as we can in the time we have. And if you haven't joined us before, the instructions are on the screen now. I'll just say a quick prayer and then we'll get started with our programme for today. Lord, we thank you for each organisation represented here today working for your kingdom. And we pray that the issues discussed would be helpful in building knowledge, integrity and confidence, and that we would be good witnesses for you. Help us to serve you well for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. So let's start with our first topic. Lawrence is going to talk to us about the digital filing of accounts.
Thank you, Jackie. Many of us on this call will have had the joy of filing accounts for our charities. All charities with income of over £25,000 a year have to file accounts with the Charity Commission every year, unless, of course, you're an accepted charity, for example, a PCC, and your income is less than £100,000, and then you're not registered with the Charity Commission, generally speaking. Now, these accounts are filed by uploading a PDF or a Word or Excel document that's converted to a PDF to the Charity Commission's online filing service via your Charity Commission account. For charitable companies, the situation is slightly different. Unless you have very specific software that allows you to file electronically, and that's really just larger and more complex charities, generally speaking, you have to print out your accounts and then send them in to Companies House in Cardiff, if you're in England and Wales, or Belfast or Edinburgh for Northern Ireland or Scotland. And then they get scanned in there and put on your Companies House record. Charitable companies can't file micro-entity accounts online, even if that option is available. And the web filing service won't stop you if you try and file micro-entity accounts. Now, some charitable companies we see have filed them successfully for many years. But micro-entity accounts only requires a summarized balance sheet and one or two other bits. So not proper charity accounts. And it doesn't contain much information that's useful to users of the accounts, never mind the very varied nature of stakeholders in charities. So Companies House takes those paper accounts, as I said, that you send in, do some basic checks. And ironically, that's the most they check of anything you file with them across all of the various things that get filed with Companies House. And otherwise, they don't check a single thing that's filed with them. They take those accounts, they scan them, and they make them available online. Now, we'll start this section really with charitable companies, because in some ways that's where this story, this journey that we're going to be on starts for us. If you're not a company, so you're a trust or a CIO as a charity, hold on and do keep listening, because it'll be relevant for you too. Now, as I said, Companies House hardly checks anything that's filed with them at the moment. Directors' information, accounts, anything. particularly when filed using the web filing service, which is why they don't pick up if a charitable company files microentity accounts. It has to be full proper charity accruals accounts, but they don't check what is filed with them online and whether you're a charity or not. This lack of checking of information that's filed at Companies House has also made our company setup and registry service in the UK a bit of a free-for-all for criminal elements all over the world. It's super easy to set up a company in the UK, and because no one checks the veracity of filings, you have literally Mickey Mouses and Scooby-Doos being listed as directors of many UK companies. If you've walked down Oxford Street in London in recent years, you would have seen all the American candy stores set up in vacant shop units where the big names have closed. But many of those shops are accused of being tax dodge schemes or worse, and they're set up as fly-by-night companies, as ephemeral as the British summer can be. Now, more seriously, these concerns were particularly sparked by the ease in which oligarchs and others subject to sanctions have been able to route money via the UK. So the government has decided to do something about this with the Economic Crime and Transparency Act, which gives Companies House the power to check a lot more information that is filed with them, including ID checks on directors, and for them to require the digital filing of accounts. Now, this doesn't mean charitable companies will be able to file micro-entity accounts before you get excited. What it does mean, and they're likely to formally announce this over the summer with, I understand, something like a 15-month lead time, is that charitable companies will have to file digital accounts using special software. Now, those accounts will then be much more searchable and researchable and comparable, because the information has to be tagged with labels called IXBRL, like large companies have had to do for years, so your listed companies and so on. Now, exactly what your options will be is unsure at the moment, and hopefully more information will be coming out soon. What is important is that if you're currently preparing your own accounts as a charitable company and sending them off to Companies House by next day, 9 a.m. signed for recorded delivery, that is going to change within the next 2 years, and you will need to start thinking about what that might mean. Now, one option for charitable companies to consider is to convert to CIOs. Many charities were set up as charitable companies before the advent of CIOs to benefit from the limited liability for trustees, and because as a corporate entity, it had benefit over trust for holding property, employing staff, and so on. Now might be the time to consider converting to CIOs, which has those same benefits, but doesn't involve filing accounts with Companies House as well as the Charity Commission. And that's particularly relevant, I think, if you have an older charitable company, because it will give you the opportunity to perhaps revisit some of the older and possibly outdated provisions in your memorandum and articles. An opportunity for a new start. And we'll have more information in the email to follow this dial-in about that. I mentioned that we started this segment with charitable companies. But I hear many of you thinking, what if I'm not a charitable company? So, for example, a PCC or a CIO or a trust. The Charity Commission is also busy consulting with charities and sector representatives and stakeholders on what this means for them. Now, they have a massive data agenda. So that one of their main priorities is being able to gather data about the sector much more efficiently. Now, uploaded PDFs clearly isn't very user-friendly for that. So they've had plans for enabling more digital filing for years now. Now, if charitable companies will have to file digitally through software, then there's an opportunity for the Commission to enable charitable companies to file digitally with them too. And if they enable charitable companies to file digital accounts, then there's an opportunity to enable other charities to do the same thing. Now, I emphasize enable because the Charity Commission doesn't have the same legal power that Companies House now has via the Economic Crime and Transparency Act to mandate digital filing. The Stewardship is part of the Charity Commission's consultations, and I've been in a couple of workshops helping the Commission understand the needs of our clients and what the potential difficulties are. So we've stressed that For example, not all charities have paid finance directors and financial controllers, and many are served by volunteer treasurers who don't use expensive software. And they're very keen, to be fair, to support charities, both companies who will have to file digitally with Companies House and other charities who the Commission want to enable to file digitally because it helps them gather data better. And they're very keen to help and support charities to be able to do this. That might mean better templates, for example, which you can upload, or web forms or free software, and that isn't clear yet. But we continue to work with them on that. What does all of this mean? Things are going to change. That is a given. If you're a charitable company, you will need to start thinking about whether your existing arrangements, for example, preparing accounts in Word or Excel yourself and printing them off to file with Companies House, are going to be sufficient in 2 years' time. And the answer is probably not. So you will want to speak to your accountants, your auditors, or your independent examiners early. Now, we can help here at Stewardship. If you're served by volunteer accountants or examiners, for example, and you rely on them to help file your accounts, they may likely not be able to do that anymore unless the Charity Commission helps to provide free or easy to use solutions. You might also want to take the opportunity, as I said, to convert your charitable company to a CIO. In that case, you might want some legal help with this, and we can direct you. If you're not a charitable company, the Charity Commission won't require you to file digitally, but you will likely have an opportunity to do that. So you might want to take this moment to think whether to review your current arrangements too, and move to using accounting software, or more specifically to a firm of accountants or auditors or examiners who will be able to serve you in moving to a perhaps 21st century way of doing things. And more info on how Stewardship serves over 400 clients already with their accounts will be in this follow-up email. And we'll, of course, keep you up to date on the timelines and changes as they're made available. Nothing has been formally communicated about it just yet, other than that it's coming, so don't panic, and we are here to help. Lastly, we're hearing from many charities, and I hear the same thing at other industry groups and in groups like the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Charity Community Advisory Group, and so on, that accounting firms are struggling with capacity because of resourcing constraints. They just don't have the people. And many accounting firms have to turn away clients for audits or independent examinations. And this is just similar to what's happening with many organizations in the rest of the economy. It'll be worth looking at this point whether you have the right support early, because if you leave it to the last moment, given these capacity constraints, we may well run into difficulty with existing providers not being able to serve churches and charities. That's it for now. We'll come back to some questions later on, I'm sure, but back to you, Jackie.
Great. Thank you, Lawrence. That's a really helpful heads up on some changes ahead. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that in future dial-in sessions. Moving on to our second item for today, which is from Archie, and he's going to share about the new updated guidance on internal financial controls from the Charity Commission. Archie.
Thank you, Jackie, and good afternoon. Well, at the end of April, the Charity Commission issued an updated version of its guidance on internal financial controls for charities, which is known as CC8. It's some time since the guidance was last reviewed, so it will perhaps come as no surprise that the revised guidance includes, for the first time, sections on digital payment systems and cryptocurrency donations. In addition to these new sections, the previously issued guidance on the risks associated with holding public collections and fundraising events, making payments to connected parties, and operating overseas have also been updated. So, what does this updated guidance mean for charities? Well, for most charities, the most relevant part of the new guidance is that in respect of digital payment systems. Just to clarify, digital payment systems refers to systems such as Apple Pay or Google Pay. And the Commission have said that charities should have the same controls in place for those systems as they would for payments by debit, credit or charge cards. The risk with such systems is that they allow payment for items without having to enter card details or personal details for each individual transaction. Usually, the payment details are in an individual's digital wallet on, for example, their mobile phone or tablet. This increases the need to have a clear policy in place which covers who within the organisation is allowed to use the digital payment methods, what the spending limits might be, and in what circumstances such methods can be used. Where someone who has perhaps previously been an authorised user of the charity's debit or credit card then leaves the organisation, it's no longer sufficient to simply require the card to be returned, as the details may still be stored on that person's mobile device. There's a risk that unauthorised payments could be made in the future, and it's therefore important that card statements are sent to someone other than the cardholder, so that any unauthorised use can be quickly detected. This, of course, is important for all card and bank transactions and not only for digital payments. Similarly, the guidance continues to underline the importance of dual authorisation for payments and indeed dual authorisation for any changes to the bank mandate, and also says that unused bank accounts should be formally closed and there should be segregation of duties between those involved in the financial affairs of the charity. And a trustee other than the treasurer should have the ability to log into the bank account and review the transactions. CC8 also includes many other recommendations around banking and payments and is worth reviewing on a regular basis. As I said earlier, the other major addition to the guidance is in respect of crypto asset donations. And while many charities might never come across such donations in practice, it's still worth being aware that guidance is available and should be referred to should assets be offered by a donor. To very briefly summarise the guidance, charities should have a policy on whether they will accept such donations. There are many risks associated with crypto assets. Their value can be very volatile, they might be open to theft by hackers, and there's much less regulatory protection than there is with traditional currency and banking systems. Crypto assets are already banned in some countries, and there is a risk that other countries might follow suit. Such donations can also be made anonymously, which obviously makes it difficult for the charity concerned to trace donors. So in the revised guidance, the Commission reminds charity trustees of their legal duty to manage the charity's resources responsibly. This means that trustees should understand the risks of holding and using such assets, and before accepting such donations, trustees should ensure that they have the expertise within the trustee body to manage the risks carefully. The Commission refer to the Code of Fundraising Practice as a useful framework for deciding whether a charity should accept crypto assets. Those are the main changes in the updated guidance, but we would recommend that all charity trustees regularly read the information available. Other topics covered in the guidance include the risks of fraud and cybercrime, public collection and fundraising, receiving donations online, making payments by different means, wages and salary controls, reimbursing expenses, making loans, and many more topics. The guidance really is a valuable resource for charity trustees and anyone else who might be involved in charity finance and should be referred to on a regular basis. Along with the updated guidance, the Commission has also issued an updated checklist which provides a useful summary of what controls might be necessary or recommended when reviewing a charity's internal financial controls. The updated guidance can be found on the Charity Commission's website, and the link to this, along with the other resources which I've mentioned, will be circulated following this dial-in. Thank you, and back to Jackie.
Thank you, Archie. Sorry, I couldn't find the button to unmute. Thank you. That's really helpful, and those links will be there, and we would really recommend bookmarking those and reviewing regularly. On to our third item. This is Lawrence again. He's going to give us some more detail on the updates to the annual return for 2023. Lawrence.
Thank you, Jackie. Now, we've spoken before about the changes to the annual return this year. That's the set of questions a charity with income of over £10,000 or all CIOs have to answer for the Charity Commission annually. And usually that's done at the same time as when you file your annual accounts. And there have been a number of changes this year, including additional questions or changes to some of the existing questions. More information on the detail is in our blog post on this, and we'll link to that in the email to follow. So this is just to flag one or two things. The new annual return is effective for all year ends falling from 1 January 2023. So likely March 2023 year ends will be the first ones really to be caught by this, because you don't have too many January or February year ends. And then June, there'll be a lot of charities, and August, September, with the bulk of charities, I suspect, having to complete the new set of questions for the first time for their December 2023 year ends. So if you file now for your December 2022 year end, it'll still have the old questions in there. The questions for the new annual return aren't available online yet. You can read through the questions, but you can't complete them yet as part of the annual return. That functionality isn't available yet. I checked again this morning, and you can't complete the new annual return just yet. Now, you have 10 months after your year end to file your accounts and your annual return with the Charity Commission. So don't worry, if you're a March year end, you still have until the end of January 2024. But if you're one of those eager beavers who like to file everything within a week of your year end, or you've already had your independent examination or audit completed, congratulations. But you might just have to hang on for a little bit before you're able to file your annual return. Now, you can file your account separately if you want and come back to the annual return later. Just make sure, of course, that you do that so that there isn't a red flag on your account later on. Now, I mentioned there are new or amended questions, and one of those is where the Commission asks about the policies you have as a charity. They're not all mandatory, but this information is displayed on your charity record if you say we have these policies. And the new policies asked about are serious incident reporting, trustee expenses, campaigns and political activity, bullying and harassment, social media, and engaging external speakers at charity events. And they've removed a couple of policies from the list as well: volunteer management, paying staff, and grant making. Now, for all charities, no policies are mandatory, but there are some we recommend all charities have. For example, safeguarding, particularly when you work with children or adults at risk, then it's mandatory. Policies on financial controls, complaints handling policies, and conflicts of interest. Some of the other policies might not be relevant to you. If, for example, you don't do any campaigning or political activity, then there's no need to have a policy about that. But it's a good time to review which of these policies might be useful or relevant for your charity. Now, if you're wondering why have policies in church life at all, we have a blog looking at how it's not just important and a compliance matter, but they can really be helpful in a positive way. And again, that link will follow in the email to go out after this call. It's just to keep you updated as well. We are developing template policies for the new ones being asked about. So if you do want to bring in those policies to either because they're useful or because you think that it'll just be good to be able to tick those boxes, we will be bringing those in, and we'll make them available shortly, we hope, separately and as part of a pack that covers almost all of the policies being asked about. So we'll put a link in the email to the policy pack that's available on our online shop that covers most of the existing policies currently being asked about by the Charity Commission. Just note that the version that's on there doesn't yet cover all of the new policies, so you might want to hold back and come back to it later. But if you do buy the current pack now, we will send you an update with the new ones when those become available. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you, Jackie. That's it for me for now.
Thank you, Lawrence. Yeah, we will send an email later via the mailing list when those policies are available, in case that's going to be helpful to you. Thank you for those of you who are typing in your questions. Don't forget, if you have any, now is the time to ask them while we have these experts on our call. So do just type them into the chat. Next, I'm just going to share a very brief update on tax compliance issues. You may recall that the Chancellor announced in the budget that there would be a consultation on tax compliance by charities, with HMRC aiming to close some loopholes. Charities generally benefit from a whole range of tax reliefs and benefits, but in some cases, HMRC is concerned that charities go beyond the letter or spirit of the law. They're therefore seeking consultation responses on the following areas: tainted charity donations, which is where, for example, the donor benefits in some way, which should mean the donation shouldn't qualify for gift aid; approved charitable investments; clawback of tax relief for non-charitable expenditure; and charity filing obligations, particularly with a view to bring in penalties for late filing. Now, Stewardship will be submitting a response to the consultation, as will other organisations like the Charity Tax Group. We will include links to some more information in the follow-up email in case you want to read up on this and possibly respond yourselves. The consultation is open until the 20th of July 2023, and HMRC is very interested in hearing the views of charities who have experience in this area. We will keep you updated in this on future sessions. Okay, so moving on to our final item. Lawrence is going to bring us the latest news on the Charities Act 2022 implementation. Lawrence.
Thank you, Jackie. Now, I'm assuming most of you will be aware of the updates to the Charities Act that's being brought into effect in stages, and we'll link to some summaries in the follow-up email again, so we won't cover all of the detail of what's happening with all of those updates. But the next stage in the implementation of these changes is June 2023. Which is, of course, now. And these changes will include measures to do with broadening the range of acceptable individuals who can provide trustees with the required advice on disposals of property. For example, estate agents and agricultural valuers, in addition to qualified surveyors who are members of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, can now also advise the trustees whether the terms of the transaction are appropriate. So that could be quite useful in being able to engage advisors, for example, estate agents. It's also changes to do with confirming that a trustee or an officer of the charity or an employee can provide advice on a disposal if they meet the relevant requirements, so they're not disqualified from exercising their professional expertise just because they're involved with the charity. It's about giving the trustees discretion to decide how to advertise a proposed disposal of charity land. And it also is freeing charities from a requirement to get authorization from the Commission before enabling a charity employee to live in charity property on a short, periodic or fixed term tenancy. Now, this might be a relief to, for example, churches, which might have property they rent out to staff rather than provide the accommodation free of charge, particularly when you don't meet the requirements to justify providing that accommodation tax-free, just because it's essential for the employee to do his or her job. There are also some changes on permanent endowments. So charities with permanent endowments will now be able to use some of those endowments without the Commission's approval or borrow against it. So it includes authority for charities to spend from those permanent endowments of £25,000 or less without permission from the Charity Commission in certain circumstances. Normally, of course, you can't spend permanent endowment funds. Now, some charities will also be able to borrow up to 25% of their permanent endowment funds with specific authority from the Commission. And further to other recent developments in charity investment case law, the new provisions will also allow charities that have chosen a total return approach to investment to use permanent endowment to make social investments, for example, with a negative or uncertain financial return, as long as any losses are offset by other gains. Now, I know the Charity Commission is bringing out some further investment guidance in due course, so there'll be more details about that as well. And then on charity names, the last set of measures coming into effect now in June give the Commission additional powers to direct a charity to change any working names that may be similar to other charities' names, or names which are misleading. So their existing power only covered the charity's official names. And they may also delay registration of a charity with an unsuitable name. That's what's coming into effect now in June. Now, there isn't a more precise implementation date for these yet. As of this morning, it's still given as June 2023. So I'm assuming by the end of this month, these changes will come into effect. Now, some provisions that were expected to come into force during this round have been deferred to the end of 2023, and they are to do with disposals and mortgages by liquidators, mortgagees, and administrators, and the wording to be included in statements and certificates for disposals and mortgages. I think this probably affect a minority of people, but if that is you, then those have been deferred to later in the year. Now, keep an eye out for further announcements, but the next stage, currently given as by the end of 2023, covers updates to charity constitutions, powers relating to the appointments of trustees, remuneration of charity trustees, and charity mergers. And that was previously scheduled for autumn 2023. Like I said, it's now been pushed out to by the end of this year, and we'll let you know when we know more. Lastly, it's interesting just to also note that the Department of Culture, Media and Sport have committed to review the financial thresholds that's set out in the Charities Act 2011 to see if they should be increased in line with inflation. Now, that might mean higher thresholds for independent examinations. So you can get an independent examination at the moment if your income is up to £1 million. Unless, of course, your income is over £250,000, but you have gross assets of more than 3.26 million. Now, those thresholds have remained static for a long time. Obviously, inflation has had an effect on the values, but the Department of Culture, Media and Sport is finally, they've committed to review these thresholds. Now, that consultation hasn't started yet, so who knows what might come out of that, but that may well be good news for charities, but no imminent changes just yet. Those are the updates for now, Jackie. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. That does bring us to the end of our agenda for today. But just in case you're new to stewardship, I just wanted to highlight a couple of links here on the ways we may be able to help you as you grapple with the intricacies of running your charity or church. If you have questions outside of our topics today, you may like to consider joining our consultancy helpline, where for a very affordable annual subscription, you have access to professional consultants who can answer your questions on a range of topics, including accounting, employment, charity law, several other areas. Details of this service and how you can sign up are on our website, but we'll put the link in the follow-up email after the call as well. And I've also included a link to our resource hub where you'll find useful information, including all of our free briefing papers on a range of topics that are pertinent to churches and Christian charities. It may be worth bookmarking for later reference, as it's a great first port of call if you're looking for information. Okay, we're going to move on to our Q&A now. Just before we finish, a couple of follow-up things. Now, there were a few questions today that were outside of the topics we've discussed. So I would maybe encourage you to take part in our survey, because if you have some ideas of some sessions you'd like us to cover or some topics you'd like us to cover, that would be the ideal place to let us know. So in the follow-up email, there will be a survey. It should take no more than 3 minutes. I'd just like at this point to thank all those of you who completed it last time. There were a lot of you. It was really encouraging, and your comments were greatly appreciated. appreciated and very helpful. But if you haven't done one of these for a while, or even if you have, if you don't mind just taking a few moments, we would be immensely grateful. It does help to inform how we run future events, particularly in terms of topics, if there are things that you feel you would like us to cover. Now, our next dial-in is going to be in the month of October 2023, and apologies, I don't have an actual date at this point. So my intention is to email out in a couple of weeks with a few more resources and the date so that you can bookmark that in your diary. So we will send that in an email soon, and we hope you'll be able to join us next time. And as always, please do invite anybody that you think may be interested in coming along. So finally, I'd just like to thank you for coming and listening, and for our panelists, Lawrence and Archie, for taking time to share their expertise and for answering your questions. We hope that you found it helpful. And as we wrap up, we pray that you and your organisations will be a blessing to those that you serve over the coming months. And we will look forward to seeing you again in October. Thank you.